and I am joining you from Anchorage, Alaska. With me today is Ashley Barrera, and she will be our guest speaking to the topic of protecting our mental health. If you're new to our webinars, this might be of interest to you. We do them daily, every day at 10:30 a.m. Alaska time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We offer webinars kind of on an overarching theme, managing disruption caused by COVID-19. I think all business leaders and employees alike are struggling with finding our cadence. And so we thought we would offer daily webinars with topics that might be beneficial to help us find such a cadence. If you have any ideas for future topics, you could email them to info@thestrivegroup.com. You can visit our website to see what our daily programming is like. I have a couple of topics for this week up on the slide. So tomorrow's is about leadership and empowering your employees. And then Friday's session will be on, or Thursday's session, actually, that's not Friday's, that's a mistake there in the slide deck. That session will be on working effectively at home, certainly very topical for the times we find ourselves in. If you're joining us live, you'll notice on the right-hand side of your screen there it's a chat function. Feel free to text in or type in any questions you have for Ashley as she goes throughout her content. I will pop back in to the webinar and ask her those questions on your behalf. If it gets to be a little closer to the 11 o'clock hour and you don't think you'll have time, or if I don't get to your questions, Ashley will be happy to respond to you personally or directly via email, but only if we have your email account. So feel free to jot that down with your question as we get closer to the end so we can make sure we don't miss you when we quit streaming. This webinar will be available via live playback. A couple minutes after Ashley finishes here this morning, I'll throw it up on our website, and if you wanted to share it with others or if you wanted to watch it again, feel free to do so. Our website is thestrivegroup.com. So without further ado, I'll turn it over. Again, this is Ashley Barrera. She's joining us here in Anchorage. And Ashley, take it away.
Heather, thanks so much for having me today. So one of the most important things for us to be paying attention to, from my perspective as a mental health professional during this time, is asking ourselves the question, are we social distancing or are we engaging in social isolation? Why it's important to understand this is that social distancing is the process of keeping ourselves and others safe through physical distance while still being able to maintain our emotional and our relational connections to others. This means using technology to reach out. I know lots of people that have been having dinner with family members via Zoom or other sorts of technology and finding ways to stay connected, going on walks while keeping space. And all those things. Other people throughout this have had increased anxiety and have gotten really worried, and that's resulted in social isolation where they're disconnecting emotionally and relationally from people in their lives. Why that's worrisome is it can lead to increased anxiety and to depression that can lead to other more negative outcomes for people. And so we want to ask ourselves, as we navigate this often unknown time, am I engaging in social distancing or am I engaging in social isolation? Also, I would encourage you to check in with friends and family members and neighbors to kind of assess a little bit yourself. Are they getting connection, or are they withdrawing? Are they withdrawing into themselves? And making sure everyone is okay during this time. One of the really interesting things that's been coming up, excuse me, in my work with my clients is, how do I talk with my family about COVID-19? What types of things should be part of the conversation? What's too much? And if I have kids, what should I be telling them? One of the things that I found, it's really important for us to make sure that we're getting information from reputable sources. The CDC, the World Health Organization, local and state news outlets, the Office of Emergency Management. Those are all great places. For parents, I encourage you, call and talk to your pediatrician. Find out what do they really think is going on. I know that's been a big help for me as a new mom, knowing how much concern my pediatrician has for my son versus some of the things that I've been reading online. And so when we're talking to our family members, I also encourage people to find a space and to find time to do this so that it doesn't become something that becomes overwhelming in our lives, where it's the constant topic of conversation. Do we want to watch the 5 o'clock news and then have a family meeting about it and talk about how does this change things for us? How does it keep things the same? And then I encourage people to really put that information away and focus on trying to resume to their life, to normalcy, to more of their routines, so that it doesn't become all consuming. I know on social media and Facebook and all Twitter and all those things, it can be the hot topic of conversation. That can also create a sense of panic. News such as CNN or MSNBC, when they're streaming these things all day long, especially for children that may be listening, it can feel as if the world is coming to an end, and it can create increased anxiety and worry for children that excuse me, don't have the emotional or developmental capacity to truly be able to integrate and to understand the information. One of the things that I encourage my clients to do when they're talking to children is to listen to the questions that are being asked. So often children will ask an intelligent question, and because we have faith in our children and in their intellect and in their development, we will go to give them the answer to the question that they're asking that might actually not be appropriate for them. Just because they can formulate the thought, what they might actually be trying to formulate is their own anxiety or their own worries, their own questions. And so what I encourage parents to do is to really listen to the question and identify the feeling and the emotion behind it, and maybe reflect that back and say, wow, gosh, it sounds like you might be a little worried, or that sounds like that news story was scary for you. Tell me more about that. And so I think those are important factors for us to be paying attention to and to be noticing when we talk to our children.
Ashley, you kind of answered the question that I had. This is from myself personally, not necessarily from a random viewer. But the question was, what if you have children that are large gap in age, so their intellectual capacity perhaps is much different. And I love the idea of meeting with them after, for instance, the evening news hour, and okay, let's process this and then put it away, right? Compartmentalize that. I love the idea. But what about if that age gap or that intellectual understanding is so broad? How might a parent or a set of parents navigate through not overshooting for their younger ones, but not undershooting and perhaps placating or insulting the intelligence of their older? Can you answer that before we hop on to the next subject?
Yeah, absolutely. In that case, that's a great question, Heather. In that case, I would really encourage a separation of those conversations, so really respecting the different developmental ages of the children. For instance, if you have a 12 and a 16-year-old who are interested in watching the 5 o'clock news and they're following it, and it's a conversation with their friends, they're very obviously impacted by it, by school, by those sorts of things, and you may invite them to watch the news with you, and maybe it's a time to put on a favorite TV show or a movie for the younger ones. Say you have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and maybe separate the family a little bit, and you can create a routine with that, and so it's not overly noticeable to the younger ones, so they don't feel overly excluded, but it also honors the intellect of the older children and the opportunity to have older conversations with them and to answer those questions on a deeper level, while protecting the emotionality and the anxieties that can come up and the fears that can come up with the youngers. Excuse me. This is such a great question. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Texas the other day, and she was talking about her garden and all of the flowers that were blooming and all of the vegetables and things that were coming up, because obviously the weather is so much different there. And I got a little jealous, and I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds just incredible. And I said, it's so weird to be in Alaska right now. We make it through the winter, and then there's this almost kind of manic state that happens to all Alaskans where we get incredibly excited to be outside and outdoors. And we have this breath of life and fresh air that's breathed back into us. But with shelter in place, we're stuck and we're not able to really engage in that. And so it's an increased difficulty that I think many Alaskans are struggling with shelter in place, in addition to what we normally experience when we come out of winter. One of the things that people I know that have been really struggling with is the lack of routine. And so, we're used to getting up, we get our children ready for school, we get ourselves ready, we make breakfast, we go to our meetings, we have coffee with a friend, we come home, pick the kids up from school, all of those pieces. that give ourselves structure, which is so important for mental health. We've lost a lot of those things, and we're stuck in our homes. And so, what I've been talking with people about is figuring out within this uncertain time, with the uncertain timeline of how long we'll be doing this, what can a new routine look like? That gives us a sense of control. It gives us a sense of empowerment. And so, if you're used to getting up in the morning and taking a shower and getting ready for work and making dinner or make breakfast, excuse me, I would encourage people to do those things. It's nice, certainly on the weekends, when we wake up and we roll out of bed much later and maybe don't always get a shower that day and you stay in pajamas. And that's nice for a day. It gives us the opportunity to recharge. But when that becomes our lifestyle, that can become incredibly unmotivating, and it can become depressing. Something I've been recommending for families is making a communal lunch. If you have your hour-long lunch break, rather than putting that peanut butter and jelly sandwich together for the kids, maybe warm up some pasta together and ask your older children to start planning menus. Think about ways for us to begin to reinvent our lives a little bit and reinvent our ways to connect. Is there a passion project that you've been wanting to accomplish that you've never quite had the time to do? Is there something you've been wanting to teach the kids? If you know the oil needs to be changed in the car and you can't take it into the mechanic right now, maybe you do that together. Maybe you teach your 16-year-old how to change the oil. And so I've been encouraging people to get creative. I've been encouraging people to get outside, to get exercise, and to really focus on turning inward. Another important piece that we talk about as mental health professionals is tuning in and really noticing what's happening for me. How am I truly doing? Asking myself those questions. What's my mood been like lately? Am I feeling euphoric, or am I feeling a little more depressed and a little worried and saddened? Assessing that with family members and with children. And if you're noticing that, excuse me, that you're struggling in any of those ways, really being able to practice things that are called grounding exercises. And Heather, I noticed you've just popped in. Do you have a question?
I do. I'm going to assume it's based on something you just said. So the email that I just received, I'm assuming that perhaps they were an essential business, because it reads, "We go to work." I'm guessing the adults in the
Sure.
in the equation. We go to work, and our older kids are at home all day by themselves.
Yeah.
When we're tired. We don't want to necessarily go out and do things. So how do they reconcile that difference of, their kids probably being stir crazy and wanting to go do something with their parents, but they're exhausted by the time that they get home and they just want to maybe veg out on the at the TV. So how do you reconcile that?
That's a great question. And I imagine that's something that many families face over a summer vacation as well. So I would imagine, gosh, I know when I come home and I'm exhausted from work, and I may have, I'm imagining having, bouncing kids that are bouncing off the walls, that are ready for your attention and your energy and your connection. And you're tired and dinner needs to be made. Sitting down and having them pick a recipe, ensuring that the groceries are there. And so maybe you're sitting in your chair and you're relaxing for the evening, and your child is cooking, and the older ones are learning about doing the dishes. And so I would think about ways that you can connect. Technology, this has been a time where I know a lot of families have rules around technology usage and the amount of time, and this is one where we've been really recommending it's an okay time to lift some of those things. So maybe if you're tired and you just want to veg out, play a video game with them together, where you're having that connection, you're having that interaction with them. I think about, it's about the time that we can start, putting on some coats and sitting in some lawn chairs on the back deck as the snow is melting. And so if your kids want to be outside and they want to be playing, take your evening beverage or your your coat outside and sit down and let them get their energy out, let them bounce off the walls outside, so to speak, while you're able to really take some time for yourself. So this is another really important piece. Our relationships with our spouses and our partners and our children or parents at this time can certainly already be under strain. And one thing that's important at this time is to focus on maintaining a positive perspective. One thing I know that often happens when we don't get exercise, when we don't get outside, when we're not able to engage in our daily routines, we can become a little angsty. I think about the way people often go on vacation and they'll say, gosh, it takes me a couple days to be able to really get into vacation mode, to really be able to get used to doing nothing. And that can be common now as well. Or if you're working all day and you're coming home and you're physically exhausted from your day, we want to think about, what is the narrative that we have? Are we in a negative headspace, or are we assuming the best? And I recommend this for people all the time, not even in the current state that we're in, to think, when someone walks through the door at the end of the day, here's an example I give, and you hear the garage door slam. Do you think to yourself, oh great, here we go again, it's going to be a rough night? Or, I wonder what's going on, I wonder if they're okay? Or maybe they have groceries in their arms and the door accidentally slammed. And so we start to think, what kind of assumptions do I make about my partner? What kind of assumptions do I make about my children? Are they negative assumptions, or are they positive assumptions? And this is an incredibly, incredibly important time in our world for us to be tuning in, recognizing that, and making a conscious choice to assume the best about ourselves and to assume the best about others. One thing that I talk about in my work with couples is, are we turning toward each other, or are we turning away? When someone makes a bid for connection, when someone attempts to get our attention, or to reach out and touch us, how do we respond? And these are really important times to choose connection, to choose support. And I'm sorry, I think you might hear a dog in the background. To choose to find the good in people, to choose to catch our children being good, to choose to notice those behaviors, and to provide support, love, and compassion in a time where it can be easy to become negative and to become tense and difficult.
Ashley, there's a question that I don't know if it's going to be easy or hard to answer, but there's a question of, what if the relationship was on their way out, or it's dangerous? How can I maintain a healthy perspective even when that happens? So again, I don't know how you're going to answer that. I wouldn't know how, but obviously
Sure.
Someone trusts you. Go ahead and take a stab at that, and then I'll advance your slide when you're ready.
Yep. So my thought is, if the relationship is all the way on the way out, and this kind of goes into my I think the piece about strategies that might help me to do these things. Many therapists right now are offering telehealth services, myself included. And so I'm a couples therapist and a family therapist, and I do see individuals. But interestingly, I've been getting a lot of emails lately, and so is my other practice, Coastal Wellness, for people that are wanting to engage in couples therapy, people that are saying, we've always known we needed to do this. It's something that we just haven't prioritized, and being stuck in the house together, or if one person is in the house and the other person's out working, and the division of labor is quite divided in a way they're not used to. It's really been prompting people to reach out. Many health insurance companies are covering telehealth services where they previously had not. And my other practice, Coastal Wellness and Counseling, offers a sliding fee scale for people who either their deductible is too high, or they don't have insurance, or they're just not quite able to afford the often high prices that many practitioners charge. And so I would definitely encourage people, whether it's for individual health, mental health, couples health, or family health, to reach out to a clinician if necessary. There's also some great online support groups that people can find. If the relationship is dangerous, there is the Awake Shelter that has resources and phone numbers that you can call. And Heather, I would be happy to put together a slide of some information to send out about resources for safety, or resources for seeking mental health treatment during this time as well. I
was just going to say thank you. I think that would be helpful. We could get that up on our website. And then we have one more question that it was actually probably 2 slides ago when you were talking about children. The question just popped in about, how do you explain to the younger children why everybody's at home, right? I mean, this is so this time of year, and they may, they don't necessarily understand pandemic. So
Sure.
I would assume a follow-up question to that might be, how do you manage the expectations? Because eventually, right, we'll go back to work and
Mm-hmm.
sporting events will start to happen. And meanwhile, they got all the attention from all their siblings and their parents. So
Sure.
maybe kind of approach that if you've got time.
Yeah. I also want to add, Heather, if there are any specific questions that anyone might have about safety, because I know that was mentioned in relationships, I'm happy to take a private email later and be able to answer those things in more detail at a different time. Another, so gosh, yeah, how do we adjust to explaining to young? I think like the question is, how do we explain to youngers, and then how do we adjust when we all go back? One of the things that I've been gosh, it's an interesting question to answer. I would imagine, talking about germs. There's a great video that I've seen on several social media posts that involves soap and water and I think black pepper on your finger. And so you put pepper on your finger and then you put it in the soap and water, and it makes the pepper fall off the finger and fall away. And so it helps to explain why it's important to wash hands for children. And so what we can talk about is that there's a new germ. There's lots of different types of germs out in the world, but there's a new germ that people don't know how to get better from right away, and it can make us really sick. And because we are good humans and we don't want our friends and neighbors and family members to be sick, that as a world, we're coming together to protect each other. And that's why we're staying home for a little while until our bodies can get used to developing the antibodies. And I'm not an expert on how to begin to describe that in more detail to children, but I do know there's
Sure.
lots of great articles out there that
Right.
you could and Google certainly about
Right.
that. But when talking to kids, I also want to make sure that we're giving them a sense of hope. And that's why I talk about that this is, what a great thing our world is doing and how wonderful it is that we want to protect ourselves.
Sure.
The other part of the question, what I would say is, we all are all going to have to go back to work. We all are going to have to re-engage in our daily lives at some point in time. And that I would encourage you to have a meeting with your family and to think about, wow, what a special time we've had being all here together. What are things we've particularly enjoyed that we want to continue being able to do now that we have to go back to work? And then find
Sure.
time to create that. Does the family realize they've really enjoyed that walk that they've gone on every day? Okay, well, we can't do it every day, but let's make sure that we take a long family walk on the weekend, or we want to continue playing a board game, or we want to continue making family meals. And so have some of those conversations about what is life going to look like now, and what things do we want to keep from this time together.
Right. I like it. Walking down COVID memory lane. I like it. We have I'm just bombarding you here today.
That's great.
This question reads, sometimes I just want to cry, but even crying can feel exhausting. Is it okay to let go and cry? Or should I try another outlet?
Both.
That's the question.
It's a great question. I heard a woman one time say that crying is a great way to get water off the brain. Crying is a release. It is a catharsis. And so it's okay to find space to do that. But one thing that I start to, and this is where this next question, how do we get help in times of shelter in place? If it's feeling like it's too much, if it's feeling like it's happening a lot, and if it's feeling like you can't quite come back from it, that's when we start to look at things like might there be some increased anxiety that's maybe turning into depression. And so I would encourage checking that out with a therapist, making an appointment for telehealth, or even a medical provider. Just to check out some of those things. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is to Google something, and I'll again put this on the next slide that I prepare for Heather to send out, called grounding exercises. Things like mindfulness meditation. The Headspace app is currently free right now. That has great progressive relaxations. That's where you take deep breaths and you slowly relax different parts of your body over, to nice music over a long period of time. And really finding ways to tune in, as I've said, and to check in and figure out, I would encourage maybe someone to keep a feelings journal throughout the day if you're noticing you're crying more often than usual, and figure out that you can even Google feelings lists and just highlight the ones that you might be experiencing, and then just kind of do it a couple times a day and put a little tick mark next to the ones that you're feeling, and notice if there's a pattern, and if it seems that you're used to feeling happy and energetic and you don't really check those boxes anymore, and maybe the mundane loss of interest and hopeless feelings are increasing, then I would encourage you to reach out to a professional.
So Ashley, this is a question just again from me, not necessarily from a viewer. And I don't mean it to sound morbid, but I will assume people will need grief counseling.
Yes.
And so I guess two questions. One is, do you have any, kind of open general thoughts you could share on grief counseling? And then the second one, totally selfish from my perspective, is would you mind coming back for a webinar specifically on counseling? And is that morbid that we would even consider such a thing? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that question. Yes, I'd be happy to come back for another webinar. And I already have some thoughts on that. Gosh, no. One of the things about our culture is that we often can be so restricted and we numb out negative emotions in search of only the highs, only the positives. And there's this view that grief is this negative thing, when grief is a part of life. Grief is something we experience in various ways, probably every day. As silly as it is, and I'll give this example to explain how it's not quite such a morbid thing. I had grief when Nordstrom's closed. I have memories throughout my life of going there, and to think about that loss of not being able to have that experience. There was to walk in those doors and to think about being a little girl buying new shoes, those sorts of things. It saddened me. It wasn't debilitating by any means, but that's an example of how grief exists in our life frequently. And so people will need grief counseling. And there's a type of grief that's called ambiguous loss. And that's different than oftentimes when we think about grief, we think about death, something that is tangible, something that we know is gone. We're all experiencing a sense of ambiguous loss right now of our autonomy, of our ability to get in the car and go see a movie if we wanted to, or run into the grocery store without gloves and masks, or fear of why the person next to us has a cough. Is it because they've been a smoker all their life, or they have coronavirus? Right. And so, I think about other cultures where when someone dies, the women wail in the streets. They let their pain out. And it's something that is beautiful in its own way. But in Western society and culture, we're a lot more restricted in that. And so oftentimes we keep those things to ourselves. And I don't think it's morbid to think about. I think that it's, again, and that's why I talk about it, this is a time where you're struggling. Establish that relationship with a mental health provider now, so that if it does come to that point where you have grief on any levels, certainly we all hope that we don't have to experience the loss of a friend or a family member. But if we do, you already have that relationship established and that support system. So it's not another layer of trying to navigate debilitating grief.
Well, I think we just identified your next webinar then, because learned something new. I always knew that there are different types of grief, but to define it the way you did would probably be helpful for our viewers. So I can't thank you enough, Ashley. And this 30 minutes has gone by. So for the live viewers right now, thanks for joining us for this 30 minutes. I hope you found it helpful and valuable. You can visit thestrivegroup.com for our additional programming and see what's on our schedule for the rest of the week and next week and the week after that, and so on and so forth. If you have any ideas for future topics, all you have to do is email me at info@thestrivegroup.com. I will search for an expert that can address that topic in a 30-minute webinar. If you see a topic out there and you're interested in watching and you want a expert to explore a specific question for you, just email me the question and I will make sure that the expert gets that ahead of time so he or she can really sort of think about it and gather his or her thoughts, and then approach that answer online for you. I encourage everybody to strive for positivity. I know that many of us are sort of getting into our cadence and we're figuring out kind of how our days go, how our schedules go, how we deal with our children, how we deal with our partners and all of that. And many of us are still trying to figure that out as things change at our work and things change with our family. So I encourage you all just to look for the silver lining and find the opportunity, or as my business partner likes to say, mind the gap. And I know it's hard, but I know that we have it in us. So I wish you the best of luck. I will go ahead and log off. I'll let Ashley say her goodbyes and tune in tomorrow. There's always something going on at the Strike Group. So again, many thanks, Ashley, for your time and your talent. I look forward to our next session. And until then, have a great week and enjoy your new baby.
Thanks so much, Heather. I really appreciated the opportunity to come on today. And if anyone has any specific direct questions for me, my email address is at the bottom of the page, and I'd be happy to answer those. Thanks so much, and stay healthy out there.